You ever buy a place and think, finally, this is it? That was me the day I signed for my house out by the woods, the one with the little private lake out back, the one I'd dreamed about ever since I was a kid growing up in apartments where the closest thing to a waterfront was the cracked blue tile around a public pool. The day I first saw that place, man, it was like something out of a magazine. Tall pines, a two-story house with big windows, but honestly, none of that mattered as much as the lake. It curved right up behind the backyard, crystal clear, silent, like my own private slice of summer. And what really clinched it for me, besides the view, I checked that deed. Triple-checked. Every survey line, every plat map, the county GIS, the whole 9 yards, because if I was finally going to have something all to myself, I was sure as hell going to make sure it was mine. And it was. The lake was fully on my proper Tino easements. No shared access, just me, the water, and the peace and quiet I'd been chasing for years. The first couple of months were everything I'd hoped for. I put in a little dock, nothing fancy, just a few planks and some posts, so I could sit out there in the evenings with a cold drink, toes in the water, music playing from my phone. I'd swim in the mornings when the mist was still rising off the lake, and sometimes I'd float out under the stars at night, letting the world fade away. Most of the neighbors seemed friendly enough. A wave here, a nod there. It was quiet. Folks kept to themselves. I honestly thought maybe I finally found a place where people mind their own business. Except, of course, there's always one. For me, that was Martha. She was probably mid-50s, hair in a sharp little bob, eyes like she was searching for code violations with every blink. Lived 2 doors down, just across the cul-de-sac, perfect view of my backyard. I catch her peeking out through her blinds or standing on her porch with arms crossed, every time I so much as set foot near the lake. I try not to let it bug me. Figured maybe she was just grumpy, or maybe the sight of someone relaxing just offended her sense of order. But then the comments started. First time was when I was out back, floating with a cooler, and she called over, that's a community lake. I just smiled, told her it was private, and went about my business. Next thing I know, there's a flyer taped to my mailbox, something about respecting shared spaces. Subtle, right? I ignored it. I had my paperwork, and I wasn't breaking any rules. But Martha wasn't about to let it go. One afternoon, I'm sitting on the dock, towel over my shoulders, when a police cruiser rolls up slow in front of my house. Officer gets out, asks if I'm the homeowner, and hand me a violation notice $1,000 fine from the HOA for unauthorized use of shared water resources. My jaw hit the dock. I wasn't even mad at the officer. It was obvious who'd called. The signature at the bottom? Martha B. Jennings, HOA president. I'd never even officially met her. I went inside, pulled out every document, deed, plat, survey, county maps, laid them out on the kitchen table just to make sure I wasn't crazy. The lake was all mine, but the fine was real, and the HOA was threatening collections and even a lien if I didn't pay up in 30 days. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules, it was about power. Martha was betting I'd just fold, pay the fine, move on, and that's how she'd always won. Not me. I called the HOA's legal liaison, sent over my evidence, and got a call back. You're right, this fine's got no basis. But unless the board reverses it, your only recourse is legal action. So I started digging through the bylaws, those 100-plus pages nobody ever reads. That's when I found the catch. Any fine over $250 required a board majority vote. My notice? Just Martha's signature. And, as luck would have it, the board was short a couple members. They'd even mentioned needing volunteers at the last meeting. So I volunteered. Martha replied to my email in record time, probably thinking she could keep me in line if she got me on the board. Joke was on her. At the next meeting, I was voted in, no objections. Suddenly, I had access to all the records. And the more I dug, the more I found. Not only had Martha skipped the vote, she hadn't held a single proper hearing for fines over $250 in the past year. She just did what she wanted, assuming nobody would check. I quietly gathered up everything: meeting minutes, emails, prior citations. Even got a few neighbors to tell me their own run-ins. One guy got fined $200 for planting the wrong flowers. Another got warned for hanging laundry on a Sunday. It was Martha's little fiefdom, and everyone just went along to avoid drama. Well, not anymore. I drafted a motion to impose a special administrative fee $5,000 for repeated procedural violations by Martha as president, as allowed by the same section she tried to use against me. I kept it factual, not personal. Got the other two board members, Tom and Lisa, on my side by showing them everything. If she can do this to me, what's stopping her from coming after you? That sealed it. We had the votes. At the next meeting, I laid out the evidence, handed out the motion, and asked for a vote. Martha turned beet red, called it a personal attack. I just said, "No, Martha. This is about following the rules." The motion passed 3-1. Martha was on the hook for a $5,000 special fee payable to the HOA fund, and suddenly, the iron grip she had over the neighborhood started to crack. The fallout was immediate. She quit her daily inspections. People started coming to meetings for the first time in years. Neighbors who'd been fined for nonsense came up to thank me. But Martha wasn't done. She tried to fire back with a generic cease and desist letter threatening lawsuits, even quoting the wrong state laws. The board just laughed it off, and Lisa moved to suspend Martha as president pending review. Again, the vote was 3-1. We overhauled the violation process, more secret fines, everything tracked and transparent, and every homeowner got a say. When Martha's review came up, the board voted to remove her for 5 years, and that was that. She left without a word, just a glare, but the neighborhood felt lighter the moment she walked out. And you know what? The first weekend after, I threw a little lake party. Nothing wild, just a grill, some neighbors, folding chairs, dogs running around, kids finally allowed to swim. People laughed, shared stories, and for once nobody was looking over their shoulder. I stood at the edge of my dock that evening, toes in the water, sun setting, and thought this is what home is supposed to feel like. I didn't want to be the guy who took down the HOA tyrant, but sometimes if you want peace, you got to fight for it. Not with yelling, not with threats, but with patience, facts, and a little backbone. And if you ever find yourself staring down a Martha with a clipboard, just remember the rules, know your rights, and don't let anybody tell you where you can and can't swim. Not in your own damn lake. After that first lake party, you'd think the drama might finally die down, right? But with folks like Martha, it's never that simple. She might have lost her crown, but she sure wasn't done swinging her scepter, at least, not without a few more wild swings. About a week after her suspension, I started getting weird vibes around the neighborhood. Porch lights stayed on later. People started chatting at the mailbox again, even old Mr. Harlan down the block, who I hadn't seen outside in months, stopped me just to say, "Heard about what you did about time." It was almost like we were all waiting for the other shoe to drop, and sure enough, it did. I found a fat envelope in my mailbox one morning, thick enough to look official. No return address, just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside, a stack of printouts, emails, minutes, old notices. Half of it was Martha's frantic attempts to rally supporters, to prove the board was corrupt, that I was out to ruin the community, that Lisa and Tom were traitors to the HOA. I just shook my head. You could almost feel her pacing back and forth, typing with one finger and a whole lot of rage. She even sent an anonymous letter to the county zoning board, accusing me of building a hazardous structure, referring to my little dock, which, by the way, was up to code. It got to the point where Lisa called a special board meeting not to deal with any actual problems, but just to clear the air. She said, "We got to put this nonsense behind us, or Martha's ghost is going to haunt this place forever." So we did it by the book. Reviewed every fine, every letter, every little gotcha Martha had tried to pull in the last year. We reversed them, sent apology notes to half a dozen neighbors, and voted in a new rule. Any future fines required not just a board vote, but also a signed statement from the homeowner acknowledging the issue. Transparency. Fairness. Imagine that. And slowly it started to stick. People who'd avoided meetings for years showed up. Neighbors brought their own copies of the bylaws, some with tabs and sticky notes. It was wild. I even caught Tom and Lisa arguing over mailbox heights with a couple from across the street, but this time it was friendly, like a group of people actually working together, instead of ducking and covering from whatever random rule Martha had pulled out of thin air. But of course, Martha still tried one last time. 2 days before her formal removal hearing, she showed up at my house, unannounced. I saw her standing out front, arms crossed, lips pursed tight as ever. She called out, "Hope you're happy this whole place is going to fall apart without someone watching the rules." I just looked at her, dead in the eye, and said, "Maybe we'll finally get to enjoy living here for once." She huffed, turned, and stormed off. That was the last time she ever spoke to me. The day of the hearing, the community center was packed more people than I'd ever seen. Some just came for the show, others because they genuinely cared. We went through everything: the fake fines, the threats, the bogus letters. Martha sat there in silence, sunglasses on like she was dodging the paparazzi. When the vote came, it was quick and unanimous. She was out, banned from holding office for 5 years. What happened next, honestly, is what sticks with me most. It was like the neighborhood let out a collective breath it had been holding for years. People started guarding together. Kids ran wild around the lake without someone scribbling down license plates. We started a community barbecue, first one in a decade, I heard. Someone even floated the idea of a summer movie night on the lawn, projecting old classics on a white sheet hung between 2 pines. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time, the neighborhood actually felt like a neighborhood. I remember the next Saturday, clear as day. I woke up to the smell of fresh, cut grass and the sound of kids laughing outside my window. Sunlight was pouring in, my coffee was hot, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to check the front door for some angry note. I walked down to the lake, stepped onto that dock, and just stood there, breathing it all in. No more fear, no more pettiness, just a cool breeze and the promise of peace. Sometimes, I still catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting Martha's glare from behind her blinds. Old habits, I guess. But mostly I just feel proud, not because I won, but because we all stood up and changed things for the better. If you ever find yourself up against a bully with a clipboard and a power trip, trust me, don't let them scare you off your own dock. Hold your ground, gather your people, and never underestimate the power of simply knowing your rights. And if you ever want to come by for a swim, just bring a cooler and a smile. The lake's open, the neighborhood's friendly, and the only rule now? Don't let anybody take away your peace.